All right, folks, we are back after we had the first week of bowl games that was electric. We had some games go the way that everybody thought they were going to go, two games that were pretty much just warm-ups for the other teams, and two games that were absolute amazing to watch for different reasons. And now we move on to the number 10 Miami Hurricanes as the underdog by 9.5 points. Right off the bat, I got to mention that is the highest spread of any of these games that we're going to be seeing in this round. They're going to be going to Texas for the Cotton Bowl to play the number 2 Ohio State Buckeyes. Woo, this one's going to be fun. All right. Kev, one thought that I had, and this is kind of just a broad overview, is how each of these teams' last games went the exact opposite way of how pretty much everybody was thinking they were going to. You know what I mean? With Miami and the Texas A&M win, and then, Kirk Cignetti coming in and getting that dub against Ohio State to claim himself as arguably the best coach of the season. So going into it, Kev, what do you got? What do you think?
Well, couple things off the bat. First, Tyler, I got to say, your voice, a little raspy, sounds perfect. You should hit up ESPN, try fill in a couple broadcast spots. I got to say, it's coming across beautiful on the mic. So,
some people have told me that as a sports fan, I come across as like a uncontrolled Philly guy. Sometimes I like to think I'm pretty tame, but the voice kind of mashes the typical South Philly guy who smokes a pack a day. So here we are. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Also, I would say Kirk Cignetti, definitely coach of the year at this point.
Yeah.
And I think that Ohio State game, and this is what we'll get into on the breakdown here, but it is interesting that Ohio State's played two top 25 defenses this year, being Indiana and Texas. They scored 14 and 10 points combined. So that is sort of, I guess unexpected. I don't think anyone's expecting a 13-10 game. I think maybe people expected Indiana to score 13. Like they thought Ohio State's defense was just good, good. I think their offense has a lot of questions to be answered. And to be honest, I haven't checked this. Is it still 9.5 points? Because
it's still 9.5, but the over-under is down to 40.5.
Now that's interesting. Okay. There's I think going into this game, the big talking point is how there's a rematch of that controversial double overtime national championship game, 2002. Let me check my notes.
Yeah. No, that was, no, it was 2002.
January 2003. Yeah. And I remember I actually was watching the tail end of that game. We were at Blockbuster. I was having a sleepover with a buddy. We were getting a movie for the night.
Dude, R.I.P. Blockbuster. Those were the best nights, man.
I know. And I will say, I went back, I watched the controversial pass interference calls.
Yeah, the one that happened against Glenn Sharp.
Yeah, they weren't. I didn't have as much of a problem. Back in 2003, I was 8 years old, very, very subjectable to what pundits were saying. So when I went back to watch it yesterday, I was expecting it to be like a horrible call. It kind of was,
that was like, when we were still too young to have a personal preference. Like anytime Chris Collinsworth says something, I say wrong. You know what I mean? Yeah.
But even though this is the highest spread of any of the four games, this one is very interesting. I think just if you look at the matchups, Miami, they have Carson Beck as quarterback. He's had some off games, but he has, sorry, I accidentally muted myself. He has the experience that Julian Sayin doesn't.
We're dealing with experience. Sorry, I just tried to cut you off. My bad.
No,
go ahead.
All good. But you look at the offensive line, the defensive line, like Miami maybe has the edge in both of those. It's one of those where I get why it opened up as 9.5 points, ACC off year. Miami, maybe if you're from Indiana, South Bend, think they shouldn't have been in the playoffs. But Ohio State, somewhat of an untested team. They played Texas week 1. They had not a cakewalk. You can't call a Big Ten schedule a cakewalk, but
No.
They didn't play Oregon. They played a Michigan team that was not at the time, unbeknownst at the time, but was headed for a death spiral. Like, they had an easier slate, and they went up against Indiana. Their defense did phenomenal. Their offense stalled out. And the last thing I'll say, then I'll kick it to you. I feel like we both have a lot to say on this game. Here's one little thing about this. Both kickers are going to be coming into this game with redemption in mind. The Miami kicker, excuse me, Carter Davis, 1 of 4 field goals in the Texas A&M game. I feel like that Texas A&M game, wind was the biggest factor, more so than the coaching staff, the players, the game plans. The wind was just crazy because going into that game, he was 14 of 16 on the season. Similarly, for Ohio State, Jaden Fielding, he was 15 of 17 on the season going into the game. He obviously missed kind of a chip shot to tie it up in the fourth quarter. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see now both of these kickers get a shot. Well, actually, I think the Big Ten game, Lucas Oil Stadium, that was an indoor game. So maybe less of an excuse there for the Ohio State kicker, maybe more of a reason he's going to have to come out and prove himself. But yeah, this game is one I'm very excited for to be watching to ring in the new year. One fan base is going to be ecstatic. I mean, if Miami pulls this upset, whew, those
It's
10,000 fans are going to be excited.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's going to be an exciting matchup, and I think you hit the nail on the head. This game is going to be a battle in the trenches, dude. When you look at like these defensive edge rushers, it's really going to come down to who can really, give their quarterback more protection, and also then it goes back to like, we talked about experience versus prodigy. Which quarterback do we think has more kind of moxie to kind of escape the sack and just handle maybe getting sacked a couple times? I think with the BIG10 Championship, we saw that Julian Sang had his first like kind of test of will. You know what I mean? So it'll be interesting to see how he comes back from that because Carson Beck, as we've seen both on the field and in life, is a guy who's not foreign to those kind of like, having to build himself up moments. The one thing that I want to mention from that A&M game, talking about like moxie and grit, Malachi Toney showed that he has some mental warfare there. After he almost lost that game, you saw the entire Miami team come around and just, amp him up, so to speak, so that he could get that 11-yard reception to win the game. Also, we got to talk about that guy, Mark Fletcher Jr., dude. 172 rushing yards. The kid went off. Now, if I'm right, or if I'm Matt Patricia, that's probably going to give you some pause after watching that and after seeing your team get beat by Indiana. He's going to have to start to kind of, all right, well, we're ending the year with how we started. It was some slight technical difficulties, but no. One thing that I was talking about was how I think that, we saw in the Miami A&M game a little bit more of a diverse offense from Miami that we're not really used to. And I think that's going to give Matt Patricia some pause because, as one of Miami's newfound quote unquote weapons after the hype that he got in that first round game with Mark Fletcher Jr. And now it's not so much about just shutting down Malachi Toney. Now it's about maybe doubling up when you see them lining up to go on those quick up the gut runs or maybe on an outside run route. I think that Matt Patricia is one of those guys who, with rest advantage, there is a lot of debate about whether or not rest advantage is a good thing or a bad thing in this situation. But looking at Matt Patricia, a guy who can look at tape and a guy who has been tried and tested in many, many ways throughout his career, I like his ability to adapt to what he's seeing on that film. So that's where I do think it does become kind of an advantage for them. One thing I did, a little trivia, want to bring up. Jim Tressel from that 2002 game. Did you know that he's now the lieutenant governor of Ohio?
No, I did not know
Yeah,
that, but it makes sense following in like Tommy Tuberville's footsteps being the
yeah, man.
Alabama senator. That's interesting.
Yeah, I always love little tidbits like that, man, and it kind of always makes sense in my mind when I hear about it. Let me look here. Okay, look, I I think this matchup is going to be tough and gritty. And when we get to my pick, what I will say is this. Everybody and their brother that I'm looking at is saying Miami is going to be able to cover. Everybody and their brother thinks this is going to be a close game. All right, more technical difficulties, so we're just going to get to the picks. Sorry, everybody, but you probably understand based on how we're talking. So, Kev, I'm going to go first if you don't mind. I already mentioned how everyone and their brother is picking Miami. Maybe it's the Julian Sane factor about like the not tested in the playoffs kind of mentality. Maybe it's people riding high after Miami beat A&M. But I do think we're going to see a prepared Ohio State. And I just think that they have a lot more of a complete roster. That's what this game is going to come down to. Who's got the more complete roster and who's got the offensive line that I think can handle these defensive edge rusher monsters on both sides of the field. So I like Miami to kind of come out here. Or wait, Miami minus 9.5. That's wrong. Whoops. I'm very tired, folks. I meant to say Ohio State minus 9.5. And I like to take the over here just because even though everybody is saying that it's going to be a defensive game, I don't think anybody's giving enough credit to the fact that there are just as much offensive weapons on both sides of this ball as there are defensive weapons. So I'm going to go against the grain against everybody, and maybe I'm going to be eating my words, but I do like Miami, and I like the over.
Yeah, the one thing I do agree with very much is the over. I think both of these coaches coming into the game, I think they realized the running game is, Fletcher had a great game, obviously, last week, but I think a lot of that was the wind. I think the Miami offensive game plan was originally going to be pretty well balanced. Once the wind's swirling 30 miles an hour, you can't kick a field goal, you can't complete a pass, risk of interception. But I think
Fair point.
I think Miami on that front, their passing attack's going to be better. I think Ohio State's going to I think they're going to be able to shut down Miami's run game. So just more so Miami throwing the ball. Ohio State, similarly, I think they're going to let it fly through the air more. It's going to come down to whether or not they can protect Julian Sayin. I think Indiana had 2 or 3 first half sacks. I want to say they ended the game with 5. But yeah, the reason I picked the over and the reason I think we're in lockstep here, there's going to be a lot of passing. It's going to be a lot of possessions for both teams. Now to defend my pick on Miami covering, like a lot of people are, it seems to be if you do that, the win says pick Miami to cover. I'm going to be referring back to my notes from when Ohio State played Illinois. One thing I mentioned was you got to force Ohio State into 3rd and longs. In that Illinois game, it wasn't as much of a problem, but I'm just going to read you from quarter 1 through quarter 3 of that Indiana game, Ohio State's 3rd down results. I texted it to myself while I was in the shower earlier. So, first quarter, interception, sack, incomplete pass, 0 for 4 on 3rd downs. Second quarter, 1-yard pass, did not convert. 5-yard pass, converted, 1 for 6. Incompletion, this is now the 3rd quarter. Incompletion, that was on 3rd and 1. Then they went for it on 4th and 1, turnover on downs. 1 for 7 on 3rd downs, entering into the 4th quarter. Now on that drive with the missed field goal, they did have some success on 3rd down. There was an Indiana penalty, personal foul, that converted one of the 3rd downs for him. But the key to the game, and this is, if you're a longtime fan of the podcast, I say things that are seemingly obvious, like when I said BYU needs to not get down early against Texas Tech.
We love cliches.
Miami needs to be stopping Ohio State on 1st and 2nd down, getting them into 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, and then just letting their dogs pin their ears back and go after them. If they're able to do that, we'll see. Miami needs to play a cleaner game in the penalties. They average 61 yards a game compared to Ohio State's 42. Did I have any other notes here? Look for Bryce Fitzgerald from Miami. Had 2 picks against Texas A&M. The game sealing one in the end zone. I'm sure he's had a great week of preparation. I'm sure he's had all the confidence in the world. Let's see if he can get a big play, steal a possession. I'm really excited for this game. I think I'm glad this one, even though it's the highest spread, it's one of the more, save Texas Tech, Oregon, that one's really up in the air, but this one is very interesting. It's got the history behind it.
Yeah, big time.
I couldn't have asked for a better one to get the nightcap on New Year's Eve. And yeah,
That's right.
we'll be back to talk about what happened. Yeah, I do hope for both of our sakes this one goes over 42 and a half.
Yeah, me too.
Round.
You know, I can kind of say like a situation where, because there's going to be so much pressure on both of these quarterbacks that they're going to be flinging the rock pretty heavily. And then that's where, guys like Malachi Tony and Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate are just going to be beating the secondaries. I do think that's where the mismatch is on both sides of the ball. So we will see. But yeah, looking forward to it. Just like you said, Kev, on that, we do have a decent amount, I stopped myself there, a decent amount of good games tomorrow. Bowl games not in the playoffs. So tomorrow we're going to be dropping a longer episode, and we're going to be talking about all the other 3 games that are going to be in the playoffs. Also, we're going to be talking about some news around the league. There's a lot of transfers, a lot of coaching carousel stuff we want to get to, and we're going to give you some live reactions of those all the 5 games that are happening tomorrow. So folks, remember to tune in tomorrow, and if you guys want to hit that like and subscribe, and remember to start tuning in the new year when we begin our coverage of college basketball.
We promise.
We promise. All right. Peace.